So some of the algorithmic instruction is making the lines bend and straighten and curve.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And another one is dispersing them. Is that an algorithm that?
Yeah, yeah.
That's something you wrote. That's not an action script. There's not an explosion script in there.
Well, the letters go between the two states. So when the letter's just in a regular state, you know, everything stays together. But then when it flips and it says explode, then all of a sudden all the lines become their own. You know, they separate from the shape, and they have their own
subject to new instructions.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden every line becomes its own little object. And eventually I wanted, you know, the level I want to take it is to have the lines actually regroup into something else, or, you know, there's all kinds of things. I mean, I have all
It
kinds of
seemed very different each time we saw it,
Mhm.
and that's how it's always going to be, right?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of
Yeah.
what it's doing.
That's why it was so disturbing for me to, you know, watch it the first time, because I'm watching,
It's not like you saw it.
huh?
But it's never going to be like you've seen it before. It's always,
Yeah, it'll never be like, yeah,
some
hopefully,
degree.
I mean, that's why I think it's interesting to have as a projection, because you don't have to pay attention to it, right? But say you're having a conversation, all of a sudden you look over and the word, you know, something really, I mean, you know, I almost wonder if there could be iterations where, you know, you could take a text that's not racist, but all of a sudden something terribly racist comes out. You know,
sure,
because
yeah,
algorithms
you can
don't
have
ethics.
juxtapositions that you don't
Yeah.
anticipate. So this is an amazing film because it's unique every time it's shown.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's pretty remarkable.
Well, after spending 6 months doing this Dream Life of Letters, you know, everyone thinks I should do another one, because that piece gets written about a lot. And, you know, actually I probably have this job at UCLA because of that.
Because of the Dream Life of
Because
Letters.
Catherine Hell's really liked it. But I just never wanted to do, I mean, you know, eventually I'd like to do another one, but I thought it would be neat to just program something and see if I could make it beautiful and always beautiful. I mean, that's like the,
Very successful. Very
Oh,
successful.
thanks.
Well, what was the story I heard about the New York Times getting upset about this article being?
Oh, that's a different piece where I took New York Times articles and changed the quotes. I switched out the quotes to quotes from Raoul Voltaire, this radical French philosopher from the 60s. And then I would repost it. I would put these articles with the ads and the graphics, the whole thing, you know, and then I would send them out to my friends, and they kept getting sent out. And some people actually thought that Tony Blair really was saying these things, and then I did that about 5 times. This was in the lead up to the war, and
which war?
this most recent.
No, most recent.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's why I got a cease and desist. So that's a completely
Oh, really?
different-
From New York Times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, I just put them up again after about a week later.
Sounds like Casey's blog project. All right, I won't talk
Oh, yeah.
about that.
Oh.
You also got a cease and desist for a similar project.
If you get one of those, it's a mark of honor.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions about those films?
I was just going to ask if what your research focus is and what you teach here and how this works into it.
Well, it's a long story. I did go to graduate school for English literature in the late '90s, and then when the internet hit, I used to program when I was a kid, when I was like 10 or 11. Then I started doing poetry when I was 15, and I've always been a terrible visual artist. But anyway, so I dropped out of graduate school because I didn't really want to be an academic, and I couldn't focus on anything either. I just kept taking too many different things, and you know, went out and taught myself C++, you know, just because I was like, this is what I'm going to do, and then taught myself Flash and stuff like that. So you know, computers, which you know in the early 1980s didn't mean anything in terms of culture. I mean, it didn't seem so, but at that point it really became great. So anyway, then I just kicked around in New York, did my poetry, and I got an MFA at Brown in electronic literature. So it was a new MFA program. And so all of a sudden I had this MFA, so I was like, oh, well, you know, I can actually get a job. So I applied for about 20 creative writing positions and didn't get a single call back. But I did get a call, but someone vacated a job in New Jersey teaching electronic literature, and I got that, and then this UCLA thing opened. So here I'm doing all kinds of things. I mean, I'm teaching poetry classes, but I'm also teaching electronic literature classes. But I'm not really an academic, so you know, I do want to write a book of some nature, but I'm really concerned more with the art rather than the kind of weird theory that people often talk about.
Well, it's just interesting because Iota's always talking about how we like cross-disciplinary arts, and not just film, but how film intersects with the other arts. And this is really the first time I've seen a really good synthesis of literature and like an experimental
Yeah,
abstract.
visuals, yeah.
So I think it's just really interesting. meld those two.
Well, I've been doing, I
forms.
mean, another project I'm working on is in Los Angeles poetry. We're just researching the history of poetry in Los Angeles, which actually does go back. And I'm trying to construct a history that also looks at the text art, because Los Angeles is like one of the, you got your Ed Ruscha and Douglas Hubler and Sister Mary Corita, and so I want to kind of, and a lot of my friends are actually Cal Arts teachers. They're in the writing department, and they don't even really call themselves poets. So, so there's actually, it does seem something peculiar about LA art and literature culture that a lot of people don't really know about.
Yeah, I guess about I guess Harvey Kubernik put out all those spoken word poetry discs in the early 80s and earlier in the 70s too.
Who was that?
Harvey Kubernik put out a lot of by LA poets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do have one big double album.
Put out a bunch of them for
Oh.
different poets. He was really big on spoken word stuff.
But yeah, I mean, I really take the word and image, like that one piece that just had like text and music. It just looked like kind of an illustrated poem. Like I really don't want to illustrate the words, So that's why, that's what I'm really pressing for. But for me, a poem could be one word long. So, luckily I let myself think that way. I think of Ed Ruscha's stuff as being a version of poetry. So.
It was very similar to the Kurt Schwitter's piece.
Yeah.
Permituzat.
Yeah, I thought that was very nice.
Yeah.
That Kurt Schwitter's piece.
Yeah.
Which
And
piece
he was
that?
on to something, Permitituta with the typewriter stuff.
Yeah, the one that said I am.
And the text came from
The
Kurt
other one.
Schwitter's, what, in the 30s or something?
Yeah, except it wasn't Schwitter's reading. It was the filmmaker.
Colin Morton's
Yeah.
reading.
But
Which was
the original text was a conceptual piece by Kurt Schwitter,
It was
right?
called Sonate. It's kind of a tonal poem, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And there's
yeah.
there's wonderful recordings of it. I think that was a fairly weak
Yeah.
rendition. It should be really German sounding, like, look at the baby!
Yeah,
But,
that's her, yeah.
Did he have a lot of other poems like that?
Did
Schwitter?
Schwitter's? I don't think so. I think he just did the Ur Sonata, which was the longest sound poem, it's like 40 minutes long. But you had people like Hugo Ball doing things and a lot of Dadaists doing stuff.
Yeah, there was,
Futurists.
he fits in with a group in a time period with the Dadaists who were very interested in language and in words and in the graphic aspect of words. They did a lot of random stuff. They cut up magazines.
Yeah.
The Dadaists, I don't know, might have been the first people to throw text and letters into their graphic art. It was very radical at the time.
Yeah.
And they were fascinated with breaking up language and using it only for the sounds or only for the graphic aspect, not for the meaning of the words. It was very
I was just thinking,
subversive at the time.
watching the Ur Sonata piece, that how this poem shows up in a lot of different contexts. Like Brian Eno used parts of it on his Before and After Science and things like that. But a recent piece, which is actually a text piece, is this digital artist named, if I remember this correctly, Golan Levin. You ever heard his name? And he created a piece that could hear and recognize sounds and then animate the text as it's coming out. And then so he would do pieces with a sound poet named Jaap Blanc, who's famous for his rendition of the Ur Sonata. And as Jaap Blanc is performing it live, the piece is hearing his voice, and the text is kind of doing these various things and reacting in real time to the tenor of his voice and stuff like that. So the Ur Sonata, probably because the meaning of the words is, well, there is no meaning, that you can, it ends up becoming this perfect thing for this intermediate stuff, even though it wasn't really meant to be that, right? It's just, except Schwitter's himself did everything. I mean, he did so many different things. Yeah, that's another aspect of my research, is to try to collect all these various pieces and really create a language for discussing them, because there's no obvious way to discuss some of this type of work. And I would like to teach a class here at UCLA and Ledesma. That was why I was kind of hoping some of those students would show up. I was going to call it Processing for Poets, but where I would just basically teach the various text reading algorithms on the one hand, just basically just teach the stuff that has to do with animating and thinking about text in space, which I think would be fairly unique.